Over time, video games have become more and more diverse with the themes, messages, and material that they portray and cover in their gameplay. We started with things like Pong, and here we are with games that cover some really interesting topics, both good and bad, both heavy and light, and both successfully and unsuccessfully. I've grown very attached to games with content like this as long as it's portrayed well, and I think certain themes in games like this can add tremendous layers of charm to the experience when playing it. A lot of my favorite games seem to have recurring themes, I've noticed, and a lot of those themes seem to revolve around mental health. So I decided to do some further analysis on these games and handpicked some of my favorite examples and portrayals of mental defense mechanisms like repression, or denial, or deflection, protection, you name it. I'll be covering 3 games under the indie game category because I like indie games, and explaining how each of these mentalities are portrayed in different ways and the charm behind each one. One of the first games that came to mind was Mouthwashing, which is an adventure/horror/walking simulator game made by Wrong Oregon that was released on September 26, 2024. The game follows a crew of 5 people aboard their freighter spaceship known as the Topar until something goes horribly wrong and the ship, along with its captain, are severely damaged, sending the crew into a grim situation where drastic measures must be taken to survive. I won't go into too much of detail about how the entire game plays out, but it's important to note that for the majority of the game we play as Jimmy, the co-pilot. And if you spend any time looking around the Mouthwashing community, you'll see that people do not like Jimmy, and for good reason. He's a terrible guy. Throughout the game, we learn that he has done a number of awful things and yet does not take responsibility for a single one. In fact, taking responsibility is the theme of the game, and Jimmy is the antithesis of that idea. Jimmy uses both repression and deflection to place the blame for the things he's done on anybody but himself. For example, while playing as Curly, we learn that Anya, the ship's nurse, is pregnant, and we learn that the man responsible for her assault was Jimmy. Instead of addressing the consequences of his actions, he never admits to his role in the assault. Adding on to that, later in the game, after crew members begin to fall, he literally refuses to acknowledge Anya's body after she took her own life because of what Jimmy did to her. We also learned in the game that the company behind these freighters, Pony Express, is going out of business, leaving all but Curly without a job to go home to when they get back to Earth. Jimmy isn't too happy about this, and I mean, what would any deep space freighter guy do after learning that they've been laid off? Crash the ship doing all but one crew member? Yeah, sure, man. Jimmy would literally rather die with the ship than take responsibility for his actions. He's such a terrible guy, but I can't help but love his writing as a character. Something about his arrogance and inability to see how he's shaped his surroundings makes his character and mental defense mechanisms so interesting to explore, especially when it's in the hands of a character who is so, evil, for lack of a better term. So for the sake of variety, the next 2 entries in this video are going to be a bit more justifiable for their actions. Now, this next entry might be a bit biased, and as a forewarning, I plan to glaze this game violently because it is my favorite story in any media that I've consumed during my time on Earth. I'm talking about Omori. Those who know this game will understand immediately why repression and other mental defense mechanisms resonate heavily inside this game. Omori is an RPG Maker style RPG game from 2020 that is heavily inspired by the Mother/Earthbound series. For my analysis to make sense, I'll need to catch you up on the main plot of the game, which contains heavy spoilers for the game as well as some pretty dark content, so take that as you will, and I'll try to explain this as fast as possible. We play as Sunny, a young boy who becomes a hikikomori/shut-in after the loss of his older sister Mari. During his time locked away in his room, we play as Omori, his alter ego. Omori was created to keep Sunny in touch with the nice memories of his past while repressing the truth behind Mari's death. Omori's way of going about doing this is creating a dream world where really everything is okay. Mari is still alive and all his friends are still together. As the game progresses, one of Sunny's childhood friends, Kel, reaches out to Sunny to tell him that he wants to hang out one more time before Sunny moves away in 3 days. If we accept, Sunny is brought out of his house for the first time in 4 years and slowly reconnects with his other friends in the real world who have all changed as a result of Mari's passing. While this all happens, Omori struggles to hide the truth from Sunny anymore because the reality of Mari's death begins resurging again. At the climax of the game, Omori fails to hide the truth from Sunny and by extension, us. We learn that Sunny accidentally killed Mari during an argument by pushing her down the stairs. Basil, one of Sunny's friends, witnessed this and wanted to help him with the dire situation, suggesting that they frame the murder as a suicide so the blame wouldn't be put on them. While Sunny was a shut-in, it's implied that he tried his best to forget everything he could about Basil so he could forget a large part of the incident as well. After learning the truth, Sunny, ideally, helps Basil through a life-threatening mental breakdown by having a nice battle amongst friends. While incapacitated, Sunny faces Omori as one more battle to decide whose influence over Sunny's body will remain victorious. The good ending consists of Sunny telling the truth to his friends, and we don't talk about the bad ending. If we decline Kel's offer to come outside, Sunny does not progress towards accepting his past at all, and Omori ultimately takes over his body. This puts him into a never-ending loop of repression and guilt that shows no signs of stopping, and by extension, his friends never learn the truth either. Alright, now that you're caught up, why attach this game to the topic of repression despite the obvious? From the summary alone, it's clear to see that the character of Omori is almost an embodiment of repression as a whole. He was literally designed to keep the trauma out of Sunny's head while cherishing the nice memories, giving Sunny a perfect world to escape to when needed. White space, the first place we see in the game, is a white void without any signs of reality, giving Omori a stagnant place to live, or sorry, survive. Another important thing to mention is that most of the Dreamworld segments revolve around searching for Basil, who went missing after a very small instance of the truth made it through Omori's firewall of a personality and maybe gave Sunny a little spook, and Omori was not having that. So later, Basil goes missing and the friend group looks everywhere for him, but we learn near the end of these segments that Basil isn't in this realm anymore. He was erased, banished, locked away in an area that we only discover after the deepest parts of Headspace have been explored. This realm is Black Space, a void where Sunny's nightmarish subconscious thoughts are banished if they bear any resemblance to his traumatic past. And this place is freaking cool, man, like look at it. In the context of this game, it's supposed to be where a lot of hints to Sunny's past lie, all banished from Headspace, including our good friend Basil, who after we rescue, is brutally murdered in a number of different ways. That's terrible. This shows Omori's resentment towards Basil and his connection to the truth, going to drastic measures to keep Sunny from figuring out himself, even if that means killing Basil several times in his dreams. However, another version of Basil is seen in Black Space, known as Stranger. This is the closest thing Omori has to an antagonist in the main plot. Not a villain, an antagonist, there is a difference. Stranger serves as a leak into Omori's world to remind Omori of what he's doing to Sunny. Stranger is simply trying to resurface Sunny's buried trauma, not to scare him, but to help him accept it and move on. Again, Omori does not like this and refuses to refer to this Shadow Basil as anything but Stranger, as if Omori doesn't even know who this is or what he's trying to do, which shows more repression tactic, being forcibly forgetting something if it reminds you of trauma. The alternate route to this game features more of these repression signs, since again in this route, Sunny does not progress in his acceptance at all, and by the end of it, Sunny no longer exists as Sunny, but rather Omori in his place. Sites in Headspace that are meant to remind Sunny of the past, good memories or bad, are now scribbled out and ignored entirely. In this route's climax, Stranger forces Sunny, not Omori, to face him as one last shot at accepting the past, and Sunny fails to succeed, and Omori arrives to help, and by help I mean absorb him and take control over his conscience once and for all. Thanks for the help, man. Stranger, in his last moment, is disgusted by this choice and says this line which I think resonates heavily with the side of the game. So you've chosen to live that way. I wonder, can you even call that living? Which, in context, is chilling to hear before Omori and the now rescued Basil return to the dream world for what seems to be the foreseeable future. Sunny's trauma is never faced here and is seen following him in person in the ending of the route. I just love the writing in this game so much. Giving the idea of repression in a form and a figure and giving it godlike powers in its own dream realm is just such a cool idea, and I can go on and on about why I love details like this throughout the game. But for the sake of this video, I need to move on to one more and possibly very similar case. Deltarune. It's been all over the place recently since chapters 3 and 4 came out, and honestly, these two chapters gave me a whole new perspective on how the main character Chris may be seeing and interacting with the world around them. The main gist of Deltarune is that you play as Chris, who is a human student in a town inhabited by monsters. They make friends with Susie and find themselves venturing into these dark worlds, which are kind of like pocket dimensions where they go on little missions to seal fountains that, if not dealt with, could bring on the Roaring, which is basically Armageddon. Hidden very well, a little too well, inside these dark rooms are these so-called egg rooms, where Chris, alone, encounters a tree with a man behind it that we as the player cannot see. The first two chapters don't really have much going on with their egg rooms, but chapters 3 and 4 just might turn Chris into another instance of Sunny. Just kidding. Maybe, we'll see, the game isn't fully out yet. Chapter 3's egg room is very hard to access, but once we do, we meet with some characters who seem to resemble the first enemies we see in the game. To the west, we find a pair of binoculars which seems to show a view obstructed by what I first thought was grass, but I actually think this is the bark of a tree. More on this later. To the north, we find the tree from the first two chapters, and behind it is a talkative man who seems to be very concerned about Chris forgetting him, claiming that Chris has forgotten him several times already, and he doesn't want this to happen again. So from that alone, the repressive idea of forgetting something has been very prevalent in this egg room. Chapter 4 brings more clues to what this tree is and what the man behind it may symbolize. The egg room is in a hospital this time, or maybe some sort of clinic. In one of the rooms, labeled with a tree, we find an NPC who asks us if we're here for art club, a place where we, quote, we draw pictures and don't kill each other. More on that later too. Anyways, the man behind the invisible tree here seems to be nodding to Chris, telling them to draw something. Which they do. Their drawing becomes tangled in itself, and everything becomes an incoherent mess before a tree is placed on top of it. As if, I don't know, Chris was trying to hide something from themselves by hiding behind a tree, much like how this man is hidden behind a tree, hidden inside a very secret room inside the game. Given this information, I firmly believe Chris is hiding something in these interactions, and something traumatic happened to them, but in this case, we actually don't know what this is because the game hasn't fully released yet. Another important scene is when Chris washes their hands. Chris channels their inner Lady Macbeth, showing that no matter how hard they scrub, the smears of their drawing cannot be washed off their hands. The line, "You can never wash it all away," screams repression and trying to forget something traumatic. This is something Chris cannot forget no matter how hard they try, and honestly, this ties into the reoccurring themes of Don't Forget throughout Deltarune, and even a certain scene in Undertale. As for what they're forgetting, I'm not sure, but many speculate it's connected to the disappearance of Des, the missing sister of one of Chris's friends, Noelle. It's also possible that Chris is channeling their inner Sunny and repressing the death of someone close to them, possibly even taken by Chris's own hands, given the dialogue about how Art Club is a place where they draw and don't kill each other. Chapter 3's critically overhated secret boss Eram also hints at Chris's old personalities, stating that Chris is a child with violent tendencies, and also referencing knives becoming dull when not being used or played with. I'll stop theorizing and just focus on the repressive themes here, as that's what I'm here for. Hiding these rooms from most players and further hiding the identity of the man behind the tree, who many speculate to be Chris's therapist given the clinic scene, makes us really wonder what Chris is going through, and it seems like Chris isn't ready to face whatever it is either, given how everything connected to it is covered by a tree. The binoculars, the painting, the man who might be a Basil/stranger-esque role trying to push Chris to accept things, they're all hidden by trees. What does this mean? Whatever this might end up meaning has me hooked, and I'm very interested to see what Toby Fox does with the storyline. And for only being included in 2 chapters, these 2 scenes have my respect of being such a creative interpretation of repression. In the end, these are just my insights on the games and their portrayals of mental health. Are these portrayals accurate to real mental health experiences? It's unlikely, since everyone deals with certain mental health situations in their own ways, so no 2 experiences will ever be the same. However, I can't disagree with the fact that these portrayals are still very powerful and made the gameplay experience that much more memorable. I'm curious to see where the future of gaming takes us with depictions of themes like this, as well as other themes outside of just mental health. But until then, I think we've got a lot of games beyond just these 3 that cover topics like this in very effective ways. Thank you for watching.